My son built a treehouse with his grandfather. We woke up one morning, and it was gone. Cut into pieces with a chainsaw. It was dangerous and blocking our view, the neighbor said. I didn't say anything. I drove 2 towns over, picked something up, and waited for nightfall. We had moved to Maple Ridge, Ohio, just after the divorce. I needed to get away from the city. Too much noise, too many memories, and not enough space for my son to be a kid. I found a small 2-bedroom house on a quiet street, with a big yard and an old sycamore tree that looked like it had been there for 100 years. My father moved in 6 months later. He was alone too. My mother had died years ago, and he never remarried. He was the kind of man who didn't talk much but always had something going on in the garage. Tools hung on the walls like they were part of a shrine. When he offered to build something with Caleb, my son, I didn't think much of it. I figured they would hammer a few boards together and call it a fort. But it became their thing. Every Saturday and Sunday, all day, the two of them were outside sawing, drilling, laughing. Caleb was 8 years old, but you wouldn't have guessed it by the way he listened to my father. He followed every instruction, measured every beam twice. My father showed him how to level the base, anchor the supports, reinforce the corners. They didn't buy a kit. They didn't cut corners. They built it from scratch. It took 5 weekends. They built a small deck with a railing, a hatch with a ladder. They painted it blue and red. Caleb came up with the name, the Watchtower. He even made a sign for it. Inside there were 2 folding chairs, a flashlight, a walkie-talkie, and my father's old military binoculars. The night it was finished, Caleb begged to sleep in it. We let him. I checked on him twice. He was fast asleep with the flashlight still on. That night meant the world to him. 3 days later, I got up early and went outside with my coffee as usual. That's when I saw it. Gone. Not disassembled. Not carefully removed. Destroyed. Smashed to pieces. Bits of painted wood everywhere. Splinters scattered across the lawn. The deck was wrecked. The ladder was missing. And the sycamore tree had deep cuts at the base where someone had chainsawed straight through part of the trunk. It looked like a storm had hit, but the sky had been clear all night. I was still trying to process when I heard a voice behind me. It was dangerous and blocking our view. I turned. It was our neighbor, Mr. Burgess. He was standing in the entrance of his garage, like nothing was wrong. Dressed in khakis and a dress shirt, as always, not a hair out of place. His wife, Mary, was behind him holding their little dog. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. My mind was frozen. All I could do was stare at him. You should have gotten a permit, he said. That thing was a liability. Not to mention an eyesore. Then he turned and went back inside. I stood there for a long time. My coffee went cold in my hand. That treehouse wasn't just a kid's toy. It was the one thing my son and his grandfather had built together. It was hours of hard work. It was something that meant something. And Burgess had it destroyed. I didn't yell. I didn't call the police. I knew how these things worked in a place like this. He had money. Friends on the city council. Even if I filed a complaint, nothing would happen. They'd just say it was on his property line or some nonsense like that. So I went back inside, sat at the kitchen table. Then I got up, grabbed my keys, and left. I drove 2 towns over to see someone I knew. A guy I hadn't talked to in years. We weren't close, but we had a shared history. I had helped him once. Now it was his turn. I came back with something in the trunk. It was heavy, covered with a tarp. The kind of thing that doesn't leave questions when used properly. That night, I didn't sleep. I waited. I sat in the dark living room past midnight. Lights off, no TV. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the house settling. Caleb was asleep in my bed. He hadn't said much during the day, just kept asking why someone would do that. I had no answer. I told him the truth. I didn't know. I waited until I saw the lights go out in the Burgess house. Then I got up. I went to the garage and opened the trunk. What I had wasn't illegal. Not exactly. But it was enough to send a message. A long roll of industrial plastic. A few gallons of fish emulsion. The kind landscapers use to fertilize the soil. It smells like death. Rotten fish and garbage. The kind of smell that doesn't wash out. I also had a crowbar, some nails, and a few other things I won't mention. I didn't plan to hurt anyone. I'm not that kind of guy. But I wasn't going to let him get away with what he did to my son. I moved fast, silent, gloves on my hands. I wrapped the bottom of his porch with plastic. Nailed it tight so nothing would leak out. Then I poured the emulsion through a small cut I made at the top. It pooled and soaked into the wood. The smell would start slow, then when the heat hit, it would spread into the porch, into the siding, maybe into the vents. I didn't care. I also left something else. A sign, like the one Caleb had made for the treehouse. Same paint, same handwriting. Except this one said, "We see everything from here." I nailed it into the lawn, right below his front window. Then I left. The next morning, I sat on my porch drinking coffee like I always did. Burgess came out around 7:30. I saw the moment he noticed the sign, then smelled the odor. He started yelling at Mary. She came out gagging. He called someone on the phone, pacing in circles, shouting. I didn't say a word. 2 days later, a cleaning company showed up. They were wearing masks. On the third day, they were tearing up the boards on his porch. I heard him arguing with the contractor, something about the smell being in the insulation. I thought that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. The next week, I came home from work and saw police at my door. 2 officers. One in uniform, one plain clothes. They weren't aggressive, but they weren't friendly either. They asked if I had a moment to talk inside. I said yes. Caleb was at school. My father was out buying groceries. They came in, looked around very slowly. The plainclothes guy asked if I'd had any problems with my neighbor lately. I shrugged and said we weren't exactly close. Then he pulled out his phone and showed me a picture. It was the sign I had left on Burgess's lawn. Did your son make this? He asked. I didn't answer. I just looked at the photo. He waited. I made the original with him, I said, for the treehouse. And he put a similar one on his neighbor's lawn recently. He stared at me. I looked him in the eye and said, no. He pressed a bit more, but then the uniformed officer spoke. Mr. Burgess alleges that you vandalized his property with hazardous materials. He's filing a report. Do you have anything to say about that? I stayed silent. I wasn't going to lie. But I wasn't going to confess either. They left without arresting me. No warrant. No charges. Just a warning that if anything else happened, I'd be watched more closely. That night, I found my father sitting on the back porch. He didn't say anything at first, just lit a cigarette, something he hadn't done in years. I know it was you, he said after a long silence. I didn't respond. He exhaled slowly. You think you're helping. But you're not. This kind of thing sticks to a kid. The anger. The silence. It doesn't go away. I felt that, even if I didn't agree. Then he said something that really hit me. You're becoming the kind of man you used to hate. That stayed with me for days. But just when I started thinking maybe I should have left things alone, maybe I had gone too far, that's when it happened again. Not to me. To someone else. 2 houses down, the Jeffersons had a playset in their yard for the grandkids. Nothing big. Just a wooden structure with 2 swings and a small slide. One morning, they woke up, and it was gone. Same thing. Cut clean. Left in pieces. No one heard anything. Mrs. Jefferson was crying in the driveway. He was shouting on the phone, just like I had done. That's when I realized. This wasn't just about our treehouse. Burgess was doing this to anyone he didn't like. The moment I saw the remains of that playset, something in me snapped. This wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't an old man annoyed by noise or property lines. This was control. Burgess wanted everyone on this street to live by his rules. No noise. No children's laughter. No reminders that life existed outside his window. I walked straight to the Jeffersons' driveway. Mr. Jefferson was trying to lift one of the broken beams, but he's in his 70s. I helped him carry it back near the shed. His hands were shaking. "We didn't ask for permission," he murmured. He said it ruined the view. It was for our grandkids. They are 5 and 7 years old. That night, I called a meeting. 7 neighbors came. 2 families with young kids, a young couple, the Jeffersons, a single mom from across the street. Everyone had a story. A barking dog. Warning letters. Inspection visits. Anonymous complaints to the Homeowners Association. It all traced back to Burgess. He filed noise complaints. He complained about paint colors. He even had someone fined for parking their car too close to the curb. And the worst part? No one had ever confronted him. He knew how to stay just legal enough to avoid real trouble. And people here didn't like conflict. They just wanted to live in peace. But we weren't living in peace. We were living in fear. So we made a plan. Nothing illegal. No vandalism. No threats. But we were going to make him uncomfortable. We were going to give him a taste of what it was like to live surrounded by people who didn't care what he liked. Every kid on the street got sidewalk chalk and was told to cover his driveway. People started playing music a little louder in the afternoons. Someone brought a drum set into their garage. The Jeffersons hung Christmas lights on the fence and brought their grandkids over every day after school. And I did the one thing I knew would push him over the edge. I rebuilt the treehouse. Not the same one. Bigger. Brighter. Taller. And this time, I put a motion-activated spotlight on it. When you looked from the Burgess house at night, it lit up like a beacon. I knew he would try something. And he did. A week later, I caught him in my yard with wire cutters. It was 2:17 in the morning. I remember because I looked at the clock right after hearing the metallic clinking outside, like someone hitting a fence post or dropping a tool. At first, I thought it was a raccoon or something. But when I looked out the back window, I saw him. Burgess, standing in my yard, dressed all in black, cutters in hand, aimed at the base of the rope ladder. The spotlight hadn't triggered because he came from the back, through the side lot. He avoided the sensor. I didn't think. I just moved. I grabbed the baseball bat from behind the door. Didn't put on shoes. Just ran out back barefoot, heart racing. I didn't yell at first. I didn't need to. He saw me. Froze like a kid caught stealing. And for the first time since I'd known him, he looked scared. "What the hell are you doing?" I said, my voice low, shaking. He tried to speak. Tried to make something up. "It's dangerous." I was going to, "One more step and I'm calling the cops." He stepped back. Then another step. "I have a right to, no." "No, you don't. Not anymore. You come near my family again, you'll wish I had called the cops." He stood there a second more. Then dropped the cutters and left. I called the police anyway. They showed up 20 minutes later, took my statement, found the cutters in my yard. I had video from a camera I installed behind the shed. One he hadn't seen. That should have been the end of it. But a week later, Burgess filed a restraining order against me. Claimed I threatened him. Claimed I was harassing him, encouraging neighborhood hostility, making his life unbearable. He even showed the court photos of the new treehouse and said the spotlight was targeted harassment. And somehow, the judge granted a temporary order. Said we needed to cool off. That I couldn't come within 30 meters of his property. I had to tell my son he couldn't play in his own yard anymore. That's when my father sat me down and said, "If you want to beat a man like that, you don't fight with fists. You bleed him slowly, the way he's bled this neighborhood for years." And so that's what I started to do. Quietly. Carefully. And it worked. It started with permits. I filed a public records request with the city. Took less than a week to get copies of every improvement, structure, and fence Burgess had added to his property in the past 10 years. There were gaps. Expired permits. A patio extension that didn't meet setback requirements. A retaining wall with no inspection approval. It was enough to raise eyebrows, especially with the right nudge. I sent anonymous tips to the zoning office. Then I went further. I found a Facebook group for our county. Mainly small contractors and real estate agents. I asked a few innocent questions about legal fence heights, residential additions, and trees near property lines. Some local code inspectors were in the group. I made sure they saw the photos. Within a month, Burgess had 2 city inspectors at his door. I watched from my porch as they walked around his property, taking photos and making notes while he followed them, red with rage, shouting. He was cited. Then fined. Then formally notified to remove the patio extension or apply for a variance hearing. I didn't stop there. Someone anonymously filed a complaint about his fence being on public easement. Another tip about drainage issues from his gutters. Each one chipped away slowly, legally, on paper. And while all this was happening, the neighborhood cooled toward him. People stopped greeting him. The kids avoided his yard. Someone threw eggs on his driveway one night. I didn't know who. I didn't ask. And the best part? I never laid a finger on him. Every move I made was through channels, paper trails, quiet whispers. He started to crumble. One morning, I saw him standing in the front yard, alone, staring toward the Jeffersons' house. Nothing happening. Just watching, as if waiting for someone to make a mistake. Then one night, something changed. His wife left. I saw her drive away in a loaded SUV. She didn't come back. Neighbors said they had been fighting non-stop. That she couldn't sleep with the constant stress. The inspectors. The lingering smell still under parts of the house, no matter how much she scrubbed. Him, he was obsessed with us. The next day, a "for sale" sign appeared. It should have felt like a victory. But it didn't. The day the sign went up, Caleb was sitting on the treehouse deck with a book in his lap. He didn't say anything. Just looked toward the Burgess house. Then down at the yard where all the broken boards had once been. I joined him up there, sat beside him. He didn't lift his eyes from the page. "Is he leaving because of us?" he asked. I didn't know how to answer. Technically, yes. But not because of Caleb. Not directly. And definitely not for reasons that would make sense to a kid. He made a lot of bad choices, I finally said. People stopped putting up with him. Caleb stayed quiet. A week later, moving trucks arrived. 2 guys loaded boxes while Burgess barked instructions. No Mary. No friends. No one helping. Just him, pacing back and forth in that dress shirt he always wore, still trying to look like he was in control. He didn't look at me once. Not when he came off the porch. Not when he drove down the driveway. But I watched. Not with pride. Not with joy. Just exhaustion. That night, after the trucks were gone, my father and I sat on the back steps. He handed me a beer and said, "You won." I didn't reply. Because I wasn't sure anymore what winning meant. I looked toward the treehouse, glowing in the dark, and thought about how it started. A quiet project between a grandfather and a child. Something innocent. Something good. And now there was this hole around it. This hurt. All because one man couldn't stand the sound of children laughing. Sometimes I wonder if Caleb will remember the treehouse. Or if he'll remember the man who tore it down. And the father who quietly made sure he never did it again. Either way, I haven't told him everything. And maybe I never will. But when I see him sitting up there now, legs dangling over the edge, looking out over the neighborhood like it finally belongs to him again, I just think, it should never have taken this much for a kid to feel safe in his own yard.